In this video, I look again at what sort of settings you can now use with the Pimax Crystal Light and iRacing's new, refreshed UI. And at the same time, show you where everything is now hidden. And all this from an older gamer's perspective. The last time I shared the Pimax Crystal Light settings for iRacing, which was really only a few weeks ago, I didn't expect the interface from iRacing to get a complete overhaul, not just a reskin. Every menu has been redesigned or moved or changed, and all of the settings are now hiding in new and exciting places to find. I don't think I'm a fan initially of this particular form of layout. It feels more like a console menu to me, which makes me wonder if iRacing is eyeing console support at some point in the near future. Let me know in the comments if you've heard any whispers. Personally, endless scrolling feels more PlayStation than PC to me, but hey, I'm a boomer, I don't like change. So in this video, I'll show you my recommended settings, scrolling through here, for the Pimax Crystal Light on a mid to high tier PC, and where to actually find those settings in this new UI of unlimited scrolling. I keep wondering if there's a Steam achievement for scrolling through menus. Anyway, I will also show you how to claw back some performance if you are on a lower tier GPU and struggling to maintain FPS on crowded grids. Plenty to cover, so let's dive straight in.
Let's get going.
PC specs and Pimax Play settings. My PC is running an i5-13600K paired with an RTX 4070 Super and 64GB of DDR4 RAM. Storage-wise, I have two separate NVMe drives, one for Windows 11 and another for iRacing. Windows has just been updated to version 24H2. I regard this system as mid to upper tier. It's a little over the top in some areas, particularly storage, but that's mostly because I also use it for content creation. Over on the Pimax Crystal Light, this is connected via the DisplayPort and USB combo cable that it comes with. In the Pimax Play software, I've set refresh rate to 90Hz and quality to medium, which is 0.75 of the headset's full capability. Everything else here is left at the default settings. I've already covered the Pimax Play software in detail in another video, so if you need a full walkthrough, then that would be the one to watch. I will link that video below. Fixed foveated rendering in Pimax Play is turned off, since I'll be using iRacing's native fixed foveated rendering instead. From my experience, it's best not to mix these two, as iRacing's version delivers much better performance anyway. As for the OpenXR toolkit, I now only use it for the performance overlays. Can't stress that enough. It's here, you can see it, but I don't have anything else selected in the OpenXR toolkit. Everything else is disabled or at the default. It's only here for the overlay so that I can see the performance. And while I'm on that subject, something I am often asked is how to display CPU and GPU headrooms, as you can see here in the OpenXR Toolkit's overlay. To do this, I set the toolkit's target FPS just below the current refresh rate. So I'm running at 90Hz and I've set the target FPS to 85. This, in my experience, gives a more detailed readout in the OpenXR overlay. And remember, OpenXR Runtime and OpenXR Toolkit are not the same thing. The OpenXR Runtime, or codec, comes with Windows by default. The OpenXR Toolkit is separate, and you will need to install that yourself. I've got a video on how to do this as well, and I will link that below. It explains everything you need to know. With my PC specs revealed to you and my VR parameters declared to you, let's move on to the scroll fest. That is iRacing's new, updated settings menu.
You have to scroll down?
iRacing Display tab settings. Inside iRacing, everything in the settings menu has changed. Everything except where you access the menu from, which is still just one click right up here. What follows is a full-on scrolling frenzy. The menus do now use tabs across the top, and you can still jump to specific sections by clicking on the text list down here on the left. The first tab I want to look at is the display tab. In this tab, I have the resolution set to 720. This only affects the display on your PC monitor, not the resolution inside your Pimax Crystal Light. Lowering this only reduces the size of the mirror display on your PC's monitor, and this is to help reduce overhead on your system. Has no effect on your VR headset. If your GPU is outputting 1440 to your monitor, as well as driving a VR headset, believe me, it's gonna struggle. Everything else under this setting I have more or less at the defaults, apart from the brightness slider, which I change from track to track along with the contrast slider. Scrolling down from here, the next relevant area of interest to us is the VR section at the very bottom. So scroll, or click here. Here you want VR mode set to foveated instead of SPS. Last season, this was called MVP foveated close bracket, but now it's simply foveated. Once you switch from SPS to foveated, you must close down and relaunch the iRacing session for this change to take effect. And once you've done that, you must then relaunch every iRacing session using the OpenXR option in this menu. Nothing else will work. With foveated enabled, two new sliders become active: percentage resolution to keep and inset size percentage. They could have renamed those a little bit better, but I'll explain what they do. At least there's now two sliders. In the last version, you had to dig through an INI file to set these values, so this is a welcome addition, though you still need to relaunch the sim before any changes you make to these sliders will take effect in the sim. Here's how these sliders work. And I have created this simple graphic for you to better visualize what I am nattering on about. This just shows one eye, but of course there is a duplicate of this happening on the other eye, which is why this system is called quad view. 2 zones per eye, 4 zones in total. By the way, this is a simulation, this graphic here. The effect in your VR headset won't look as bad as this, and it also doesn't affect the black boxes. I couldn't quite get that in my visual, so you'll have to use your imagination. The percentage resolution to keep slider controls the clarity around your peripheral vision, the stuff you're not staring directly at, these bits here. Higher values equals a clearer display in the peripheral area, but the image is then heavier on performance for your GPU to process. Lower values save resources and are lighter on the GPU, but this will make the details in the peripheral area of your vision look pixelated. I usually notice it more on the dashboard of open wheel cars for some reason. The next slider is the inset size percentage slider, which adjusts the size of the clear central area your eyes are focusing on. Again, higher settings equals a bigger area in the center of your display, but will again be more demanding on your PC, while lower values will mean a smaller, sharp zone in the center of your display, and this will be easier on your GPU. You can only set either slider to a value between 25 and 50, so you need to play around here to find out what works for your eyes and your hardware. Too low and your mirrors could look pixelated and your dash might be unreadable. Too high and your PC's cooling fans will be begging for mercy. On my RTX 4070 Super, the defaults of 35% and 40% respectively work very well on all but the most crowded tracks. So that's what I use for the majority of my races. I will circle back to these sliders when I cover performance tweaks for lower tier systems later in this video. But for now, this is my suggested settings for the display tab only. In the next section of this video, we'll move on to the graphics tab.
Recommendations.
iRacing graphics tab. Next up is the Graphics tab, the place where performance dreams are made or broken. For my setup, almost everything in the world detail section is set to low, except cars and event, which I think breathes some much needed life into the iRacing visuals and are set to high. That being said, foliage, two-pass trees and quality trees are switched off. I don't really need them, so I don't have them on. Steering wheel is set to hands and hide obstruction is set to halo. This is just my personal taste. I don't think that affects FPS, but it does affect immersion. Headlight detail is disabled since those shiny beams can really eat your performance. On mirrors, I keep them set to the maximum allowed in the car, but be warned, this varies from car to car. Jump from GT to Formula and you'll have to tweak this setting. Everything below that, including virtual mirror, is off. I'll come back to virtual mirror in the performance clawback section, which will be later in this video. Max cars is set to 63, mainly because Race Labs, which I sometimes use, demands this. Performance-wise, I haven't noticed a difference setting it to 63. For draw cars in pits, I run numbers like this. The first number controls how many cars you see in front, and the second covers the number of cars seen in your mirrors. Reducing these numbers can help with performance, but you might get pop-ins for cars in the distance. Dynamic level of detail is off in my settings because in my experience, letting iRacing fiddle with the LOD in VR just introduces stutters. But that's on my system, so your mileage may vary, and if you're having issues with FPS, this setting might be worth trying, particularly on tracks like Daytona, which demand a lot of performance from your PC. Now, the image quality section. Shader quality I have at high, as ultra is now something I only recommend if you've got something like a 5080 or above. Particle detail is low with full resolution toggled off. And finally, shadow maps are on because I like a few shadows around the place to make the track feel alive, but everything else below that is set to off. All of the post-processing on my system is set to off. HDR does nothing for me. It does eat frames, but it doesn't do anything for the visual quality. Some drivers swear by it and say HDR helps them see brake lights. So if your vision is in some way struggling when you look at brake lights, you might consider flipping this one on. Like I say, for me, does nothing. SSR, screen space reflections, is off because it's a brutal performance hog, and it can also misbehave with iRacing's native foveated rendering. Be aware though, this setting is specifically for rain, and not having SSR on in the rain might technically leave you at a disadvantage for those drivers that do have it on. But since rain is already a GPU performance drain, you're going to need some serious PC horsepower to run SSR in the rain. Next, the anti-aliasing section, which I'm kind of shocked that isn't higher up the menu because it's absolutely crucial to running any kind of VR. Anyway, I run MSAA at 4x with the filter set to sharp, which means I don't have to enable sharpening in the post-processing section. Depth of field and replay render modes are both off, although I believe the latter has no actual effect on VR performance. Finally, we reach the frame rate section. I run this at no limits as I find that setting a cap often causes weird issues in my VR setup. Latency is off as the NVIDIA setting here has never really helped me out. Video mem swap and 2048 car textures I both have selected on. With these settings on an i5 13600K and a 4070 Super, I get a decent headroom on most tracks. Full grids can cause a drop frame or two, but this is only at the beginning, and this soon stabilizes as the race progresses and the cars spread out. If you use these settings that I recommend and still can't hit the performance you want, don't panic. We'll tackle optimization tricks for lower tier GPUs and CPUs in the next section of this video.
Power is a curious thing.
Clawing back performance. If your GPU is weaker than a 4070 Super or your CPU is getting old, things can get tricky. A rookie race with a 12-car grid usually isn't a problem. And with the settings I've recommended for the Pimax Crystal Light, you can usually hold a stable frame rate in such races, even at 90 Hz. But once you move up to a D-class race and even beyond, grids of 25 or 30 cars is not unusual, and this can make it harder to maintain that 90 FPS. The first thing you can try doing is switching off the cockpit mirrors in favor of the virtual mirror. This reduces the rendering load and doesn't require a full restart of iRacing, though you do need to exit the car to reach the graphics tab. If you prefer to keep cockpit mirrors but still need extra performance, adjusting these sliders in iRacing is worth a shot. These settings only apply after restarting the sim, so keep that in mind. Lowering the resolution to keep and inset size value reduces GPU load, but go too far and your mirrors and instrument panel could look more pixelated than you're comfortable with. The right balance depends on your system and your eyes, so expect some trial and error when using these sliders. If neither of these options gets you a stable performance, the latest version of Pimax Play now includes GPU upscaling. This feature renders at a lower resolution and upscales in real time, boosting performance, but at the cost of visual fidelity. You can pick between NIS and FSR upscaling methods, both of which work with NVIDIA and AMD cards. I'm not sure about Intel graphic card support. Once enabled, you can select quality, balanced or performance modes with a custom option for fine-tuning. In my testing at Indianapolis with a 30-car GT4 grid, my 4070 Super without upscaling would often fail to keep anywhere near 90 FPS at the start of the race, but then attain that FPS from about a lap or two onwards from the start. With quality mode selected, frame rates improved slightly, but with some visual loss. Balanced gave a bigger performance boost, but image quality suffered noticeably. Performance mode should have been the fastest, but in practice it looked both awful and delivered the worst results. Unfortunately, the visual degradation isn't easy to capture in these recordings. It's only really obvious inside the headset, so you'll have to take my word for it. The performance in GPU upscaling is really bad. But it's okay. This is a new feature from Pimax and I suspect it still needs some refinement. For now, I'd recommend sticking to quality or balanced, as performance will really hurt your eyes and also your FPS. That's not a great combination, is it? Finally, if none of these changes are enough, dropping the Pimax Play refresh rate to 72 Hz is your best option. This has a clear impact on FPS, especially in busy races, though it does require a headset restart. Combining 72 Hz with the virtual mirror will probably allow you to drive in any conditions on any track. When you're sorting out the best visual quality with the least amount of FPS drop, there's a lot to do, and experimentations with all these different dials is going to take you a long time. It's long-winded, but the payoff in immersion in VR is always, in my opinion, worth the effort.
Make the game more immersive.
Conclusions. When I race, usually I run at 90 Hz using the settings I shared earlier in this video. On heavy grids, I will see some frame drops at the very start, but nothing that makes me want to reach for GPU upscaling. If it does get bad, I'll switch on the virtual mirror. But honestly, if that still doesn't solve the problem, I'd rather drop to 72 Hz and keep the visual quality rather than relying on upscaling. That's just my preference though, your mileage may vary. It's also worth remembering that performance varies a lot from track to track in iRacing. For example, last week I ran the Production Car Challenge endurance race at WeatherTech, hello Tom, in the rain at 90 Hz without any upscaling. There were some dips in FPS, sure, but nothing that pushed me to turn on the virtual mirror, let alone consider GPU upscaling. Of course, that's on my system. If you're on a lower tier hardware, you may need to compromise a little more, and GPU upscaling could be useful to you. Just avoid the performance setting for now until Pimax have had another look at it. Personally, I'd love to see something like foveated tangent rendering included in the Pimax Play app, something similar to what you get in the Oculus debug tool or even in the FOV tangent sliders in Virtual Desktop. These crop the images in areas that you don't really see, like the very top and bottom, cutting down on the render load without reducing visual quality. For me, that's the best way to hit a stable FPS without giving up the wonderful clarity the Pimax Crystal Light can deliver. Hopefully, Pimax can add something like foveated tangent sliders rendering or whatever to this Pimax Play app at some point in the future. Speaking of the future, Pimax have a flash sale on September the 26th at 5 p.m. UTC. This will allow you to enter this code shown here to get 10% off your purchase. The flash sale will only last for 6 hours, so if you are interested, set a reminder and check the links in the description of this video. In the meantime, I hope this video has helped you, and until the next one, race clean, and I'll see you on track. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to click the like button, and if you haven't already done so, subscribe. Click the little bell icon if you want to be notified of any future videos.